Hi everybody, it's Miss Smith. Today we are on our last day of our fairy tales and tall tales. So we have one more story. It's called Casey Jones. And what we're going to be doing is we're reading a story about a character, and you're going to see Casey Jones, but he is actually a real person. But this story really can't happen, but we're learning about a real person. So let's get started. When Casey was a young man growing up in Kentucky, the railroad was the fastest way of getting around. This was back in the day before airplanes and rocket ships. There were no cars, no trucks. There were only horse-drawn vehicles, and the mighty iron horse, and it was called the locomotive. Casey was an engineer for the Illinois Central Railroad. He loved to sit way up in the cabin on the train with one hand on the whistle and one hand on the brake. When the tracks were straight and clear, Casey would pull on the throttle and the train would take off like a rocket ship into space. When he came into the station, he would pull on the brake and bring the train to a sudden stop. Casey loved to watch the trees and fields go whizzing by as he zoomed through the countryside. He loved to make the train's whistle blow, and there were no other engineer who could blow the train whistle the way that Casey did. Casey's whistle started off soft, like a whippoorwill. A whippoorwill is a bird. Then it rose to a howl, like a coyote crying in the night. Finally, it faded to a quiet whisper. People in the town always knew when Casey was coming. Even before they could see his train, they could hear it. They hear the powerful chugga, 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 getting louder and louder, and they'd hear that wild whistle sound. Some said Casey's whistle had magic powers. They said that when Casey blew his whistle, little babies would wake up from their naps, but they wouldn't cry. Instead, they'd make the little chugga, chugga, whoo, whoo sound and fall right back asleep. When Casey blew his whistle, the cows would give an extra quart of milk, and the chickens would lay a dozen eggs each. As the story goes, if you cracked one of those eggs in a cold frying pan and put a piece of plain bread just as soon as Casey was blazing by, the pan would be a nice fried egg over easy on the side of toast. Now, the reason Casey drove really fast was simple. He took great pride in always being on time. Casey wanted to make sure that the train got where it was going when it was supposed to be there, no matter what. Whenever he started out on a run, the railroad men would wave and yell, "Bring her in on time, Casey," and they know he would. But Casey couldn't make the train go that fast without his good looks. No, Casey needed a good fireman to help him with that. And he had one of the best in Sim Webb. The firemen on the train didn't put out fires like they thought. They put out the fireman's job was to keep the fire and the engine burning and the coal going into it. When the flames were roaring, that made a lot of steam that made the train go fast. No doubt about it, Slim Webb was the first-rate fireman. He could shovel coal faster than anyone on either side of the Mississippi. The faster Sim shoveled, the faster Casey could drive the train. Sim Webb kept the fire good and hot, and Casey Jones got their trains in on time. Together, they were an unbeatable team. There was one day that they almost didn't make it to the station on time. They were carrying a load of mail to Memphis, Tennessee, and it was raining dogs and cats. The rain had been falling for 5 or 6 weeks. At the station in Memphis, the men waited on Casey to arrive. Some said, "There's no way he can make it on time with all that rain. He'll have to slow down." But others said, "Just you wait. Casey Jones makes it. He's always on time." And sure enough, he was. Well, they didn't even have to ask. Scared it's gonna fall. They didn't even have to ask Casey if he would take the man's place. Tired as he was, Casey got dressed and headed to the station. When he got there, he found Sim Webb already stoking the fire, coal, getting ready to go for the day. Now, friends, here's what I have to tell you, the sad part of this story, about how Casey met his end. As Casey mounted and climbed into the cabin, took the throttle in hand, he heard someone shout, "Casey, you're already more than an hour and a half late." But Casey smiled to himself. "I guess that means I'll have to go a little bit faster." Casey opened up the throttle and plunged into the dark. Sim Webb shoveled the coal with all his might, and the train chugged faster and faster and faster. "Casey!" Sim yelled. "You're running too fast." But Casey said, "Fireman, don't you fret. Keep knocking at the fire door, and don't give up yet. I'm going to run this train until she leaves the rail, or make it on time with the southbound mail." They drove on. The train gained speed until it was flying faster than the speed of light. Then Casey said, "I believe we'll make it through." Casey got the signal that the tracks were cleared up ahead, so he went down the tracks, pushing the train as fast as it would go. He was going so fast it looked like he would make it on time. Just then, he squealed around a curve through the darkness and saw a light ahead. He knew that light was not on his track. At that moment, Casey knew there was a broken down freight train stuck on the track ahead, and he was speeding straight towards it. Casey pulled the brakes as hard as he could and yelled, "Jump, Sim!" "Casey, you come on," replied Sim. "Jump!" Casey shouted in the blink of an eye. Sim jumped, but Casey stayed on the train. He knew he could not stop the train in time, but he knew he had to slow it down. He knew that if he jumped and let go of the brake, his train would crash into the other at a dangerously high speed. So Casey pulled the brake with all of his might. The terrible screeching, squealing sound ripped through the darkness. Then came the crash. The trains, they met in the middle of a hill, in a head-on tangle that was bound to spill. He tried to do his duty, the men said, but Casey Jones ended up dead. Poor Casey, when they found him, and they said that he had one hand still on the brake and one hand on the whistle, trying to stop his train the best he could with giving the other train warning. Casey Jones didn't survive that fateful night, but he was the only person that died in the crash. Casey's bravery that night saved all of the passengers on both trains and Sim. After that, thanks to Sim Webb keeping the story alive, people would tell the stories about the brave engineer named Casey Jones. They even made up songs about him. You've already heard some parts of the songs. Here's another. Casey Jones mounted to the cabin. Casey Jones, throttle in his hand. Casey Jones mounted to the cabin, took a trip to the promised land. They say that if you look up in the sky on a clear night, you can see a flash of light across the sky. Well, that might be a shooting star. But then again, it might be Casey Jones roaring across the sky. Chugga chugga, chugga chugga on time. Till the end of